The world had never looked so ordinary yet so terrifying in color. The early morning sun painted the French countryside in muted amber, gilding the rooftops of a small village with a deceptive calm. Smoke rose lazily in the distance, faint yet insistent, a reminder that nothing in this world remained untouched by war. Emil Richter, barely 23, adjusted the strap of his camera and took a cautious step onto the cracked cobblestone streets. He had been drafted into the German war effort as a photographer, a role he neither sought nor wanted, yet one that now tethered him to the front lines in ways he could scarcely imagine. His boots clicked against the stones, echoing faintly in the deserted village square. Shops were shuttered, their windows boarded, graffiti scrawled and hastily sprayed ink marking who had claimed the area last. Emil's heart pounded as he moved, not because of the physical exertion but because of the weight of what he carried, his camera, a lens into history, a weapon of truth. Each click of the shutter might be innocuous, yet each frame he captured risked betrayal. Soldiers passed in tight formations, boots drumming the earth, rifles gleaming dully in the early light. Their faces were a mixture of fatigue, tension, and the strange complacency that comes when a man becomes a cog in a machine of death. Emil ducked into an alleyway, adjusting the lens. The color was overwhelming. He had seen black and white photographs in magazines and newspapers, but they had always felt sterile. Here, the rich reds of the soil, the earthy greens of shattered gardens, the muted yellows of rationed bread, it was all painfully, brutally real. Every tone, every hue, was a layer of humanity that had survived despite the encroaching shadows. He aimed the camera at a small group of villagers emerging cautiously from the ruins of what had once been a bakery. A mother clutched her child, eyes wide with uncertainty. The boy's red scarf was tattered, the edges fraying, yet it added a strange vibrancy to an otherwise desolate scene. Emil held his breath and pressed the shutter. Each photograph was more than an image, it was a narrative, a fragment of life unwilling to bow entirely to war. Across the square, a squad of German officers conferred in low tones, maps spread on the hood of a military truck. Emil knew these men were capable of ruthless efficiency, yet he also saw fear glimmering behind their disciplined facades, the unspoken anxiety of men tasked with orchestrating chaos. His camera recorded silently, translating tension into color and texture, light and shadow. As he moved closer to the outskirts of the village, the stench of smoke and unburied refuse assaulted him. Children ran past, carrying what little food they had managed to salvage. Their laughter was faint, fragile, yet it clung stubbornly to the air, defiant in its normalcy. Emil felt an ache deep within him. These moments, fleeting and raw, would vanish without a witness. His camera, heavy on his shoulder, became an extension of his conscience. He could not let this disappear. Suddenly, the roar of artillery echoed from the distant hills. Birds scattered, leaving streaks of white against the smog-laden sky. Emil froze, instinctively lowering himself behind a broken stone wall. Smoke from a nearby shell drifted toward him, stinging his eyes. Soldiers shouted, orders cutting sharply across the valley. He kept filming, hands steady despite the adrenaline thrumming in his veins. Every explosion, every shouted command, every tremor of the earth beneath his feet, his lens would record it all. Hours passed, each frame more jarring than the last. Emil documented the mundane alongside the monstrous. A farmer coaxed a goat from the rubble, a woman held a bucket of water like a precious relic, and behind them, buildings crumbled silently, indifferent to human toil. He saw officers reprimand men for minor mistakes, saw brothers in arms comfort one another in the open fields. All of it existed in a strange, unbearable contrast, life and death, hope and despair, vibrancy and ruin, all in color. By midday, Emil reached the edge of a forest, a thin line of trees that had survived the initial bombardments. He crouched behind a gnarled oak, adjusting his focus on a small group of soldiers setting up a temporary command post. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling their fatigued faces with gold and green. One young lieutenant looked directly toward him, and Emil felt a flicker of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of each other's humanity amidst the machinery of war. He captured it. The forest was alive with subtle movements, birds hiding, small animals scurrying, the rustle of leaves disturbed by distant artillery vibrations. Emil's camera translated these small, living details into a narrative that no report could convey. Each shutter click was an act of rebellion, preserving truth where propaganda and history sought to simplify or sanitize. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the scarred landscape, Emil understood the enormity of what he had begun. His camera was no longer just a tool, it was a vessel, a testament to the ordinary and extraordinary alike. The village, the soldiers, the children, the smoke, the sunlight, the terror, and the fleeting joys, all captured in color that refused to lie. And somewhere deep in his chest, a new determination took root: he would continue to film, no matter the risk. The world would see the war as it truly was, raw and vivid, through his eyes. The story had begun, and nothing, not fear, not death, not orders from above, would stop it. The forest air was thick with the scent of damp earth and charred timber, the remnants of villages that had fallen before the advancing fronts. Emil Richter moved silently between gnarled trees, his camera slung beneath his coat, concealed beneath a map and a bundle of rationed bread. Every step was calculated, every snapped twig beneath his boots sounded like a gunshot in his ears. He was no longer merely a photographer, he was a witness threading himself through danger, threading himself into stories the world had yet to see. The German officers had given him a pass, a flimsy guise of importance, but he knew it was worthless if he was discovered behind their lines with a camera. A single misstep, and he would be shot without ceremony. Yet the temptation, the need to capture the truth, was overpowering. Every face, every gesture, every fleeting human moment demanded to be remembered. In a clearing, Emil glimpsed a small encampment of soldiers huddled around a makeshift fire. Their uniforms were tattered, boots caked in mud, hands shaking from exhaustion or fear, or both. One soldier clutched a photograph in his palm, eyes misting, fingers trembling. Emil raised the camera, framing the scene carefully, the firelight illuminating raw emotion on pale, dirt-streaked faces. He clicked. The shutter was a whisper in the night, yet it recorded the universes contained in those men, their homes, their losses, their hopes, their terrors. As he crept closer, he observed the interactions between men in moments both mundane and profound. A corporal shared his meager portion of bread with a fellow soldier, smiling faintly despite the horrors that surrounded them. In another corner, two soldiers huddled over a tattered map, plotting maneuvers while exchanging hushed jokes, trying to cling to a fragment of normalcy amid the chaos. Emil's lens captured all of it. He knew these human moments, now immortalized in color, were more telling than any official report. Suddenly, the whine of artillery shells broke the fragile calm. Emil froze, heart hammering, and ducked behind a fallen tree trunk. The explosion rocked the forest, sending a plume of dirt and smoke into the twilight. Soldiers scrambled, shouting names, scanning the horizon for the invisible enemy. Emil filmed instinctively, capturing every flinch, every tremor of fear, every quick, desperate glance. The forest was alive with violence, and his camera became both shield and witness. Hours passed like minutes. He moved stealthily, documenting soldiers tending to wounds, helping each other quietly, or pausing to send messages home on battered typewriters. Each frame revealed the duality of war, moments of intimate humanity juxtaposed against the brutal machinery of conflict. Emil began to understand that color, true, vivid color, could convey emotion and reality in ways black and white images never could. The deep crimson stains of blood, the earthy greens of trampled moss, the dull grays of smoke and stone, all whispered truths that words could not. In a nearby clearing, Emil stumbled upon a group of prisoners of war, huddled together beneath a tattered tarp. Their uniforms were rags, their eyes hollow, and yet in some, a glimmer of hope persisted. He crouched, adjusting the focus, careful to remain hidden from passing patrols. One young man clutched a small notebook, scribbling feverishly, as if documenting memories that might otherwise vanish. Emil captured the scene with quiet reverence, aware that his footage might be the only testament to their endurance. Night fell, thick and suffocating. The forest became a labyrinth of shadows, the sound of distant gunfire and mortar fire punctuating the darkness. Emil slipped between trees, careful to avoid patrols, careful to avoid his own heartbeat giving him away. His camera recorded the subtle glint of moonlight on rifles, the tense posture of sentries, the whispered prayers of soldiers as they lay in mud, clutching their comrades. The psychological toll of constant danger weighed heavily. Emil felt every emotion of the men he filmed, their fear, their frustration, their fleeting moments of camaraderie, and their small, almost imperceptible victories. He realized that war was not just battles, strategies, or victories. It was an endless cascade of human experiences, small and monumental, each one deserving remembrance. At dawn, Emil reached a ridge overlooking a strategic road. Vehicles moved along the path, armored trucks and jeeps transporting men and supplies, unaware of his silent scrutiny. He angled the camera, capturing the motion in fluid, precise detail. Each movement, each shadow, each ripple of dust told a story about the enormity of the conflict and the lives enmeshed within it. He could almost hear the thoughts of the soldiers: fatigue, determination, fear, longing. His camera did more than record, it interpreted. In one remarkable sequence, Emil filmed a soldier attempting to write a letter home, the paper trembling as he poured words onto it, hands soiled with mud and blood. The officer nearby watched silently, giving the soldier the time to finish. This fleeting act of humanity, a small rebellion against the enormity of war, would become one of Emil's most poignant pieces of footage. Color amplified the intimacy, the yellowed paper, the reddish soil on the hands, the muted blue of the uniform, layering depth onto human emotion. By mid-morning, Emil had circled the encampment, capturing dozens of interactions: a young private whispering reassurances to a terrified recruit, a cook sharing stew with trembling hands, a medic tending to an injured officer. He moved like a shadow, invisible yet omnipresent. Every photograph, every frame of film, was a testament to the human capacity to endure, adapt, and resist even in the most unbearable circumstances. As the sun reached its zenith, Emil paused to review some of his film. The images shimmered with intensity, the colors vivid and alive. He realized that he was documenting history in a way that textbooks never could. Black and white photographs reduced events to abstraction. His footage captured the palpable textures of existence: sweat, grime, blood, mud, and fleeting smiles of defiance. Each frame told a story of life persisting amid the machinery of war. Yet Emil knew danger lurked everywhere. One misstep, one glance from an officer, could end him instantly. Still, the calling was irresistible. He had become more than an observer, he was a chronicler of truth, a guardian of the unseen, the unsaid, the unnoticed. The forest, the soldiers, the prisoners, the quiet human gestures, they all depended on him to survive in memory. By evening, Emil retreated to the edge of the forest, exhausted yet exhilarated. He had survived the day, his camera filled with hours of footage and photographs that would, decades later, reveal the reality of life behind enemy lines. The human story of war, raw and unfiltered, vibrantly alive in color, was being preserved frame by frame. And as he gazed at the sun setting behind distant hills, Emil understood that his journey had only just begun. The war was far from over, the dangers multiplying, yet the mission remained clear: capture the humanity amidst the horror, and let history finally see the world as it truly was. By the spring of 1944, the tides of war were shifting. Emil Richter, still crouched in forests, hiding behind ruins, and moving stealthily between soldiers, had begun to understand the deeper currents of the conflict. The Allies were advancing relentlessly, their strategic victories forcing changes along every front. Yet Emil's world remained intimate and visceral: the fractured lives of ordinary people, the fleeting courage of soldiers, and the moments of humanity that persisted in the face of unimaginable violence. Color revealed everything: the subtlety of expressions, the interplay of light and shadow, the emotional intensity of every scene. In a liberated village, Emil observed the first tentative gestures of freedom. Children, faces smudged with soot and dirt, ran through streets littered with debris, waving small flags salvaged from homes. Their laughter, fragile and fleeting, cut through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Emil's lens captured every motion: the tilt of a head, the glint in an eye, the way sunlight caught strands of hair dusted with ash. Each frame was a declaration that life could persist even amid devastation. He moved carefully through streets now dotted with Allied soldiers. The men, weary yet determined, patrolled cautiously, their expressions alternating between focus and exhaustion. Emil's camera recorded the intricate dance of occupation and liberation, the fear in some faces, the cautious relief in others, and the subtle gestures of communication that conveyed trust, suspicion, and survival instinct. He was no longer just documenting, he was interpreting the raw language of human resilience. In one street, a small bakery reopened, the baker kneading dough in the ruins of a collapsed building. The smell of bread, almost unbearable in its familiarity, mingled with the acrid scent of smoke and rubble. Emil focused his camera, capturing the contrast, ordinary life persisting amid destruction. Behind the counter, a woman carefully cut slices of bread for a long line of villagers, her hands trembling from fatigue and emotion. Children clutched pieces, savoring each bite as if it were gold. Emil's lens immortalized the tension between survival and normalcy, highlighting the small victories that defined human perseverance. Farther along, he documented a scene of stark tragedy, a mother kneeling beside the body of her child, cradling the limp figure with a tenderness that contrasted violently with the harsh landscape. The colors were vivid, the crimson of blood against pale skin, the soft hues of torn clothing, the muted gray of crumbling walls, forcing the observer to confront the raw truth of war. Emil's camera trembled slightly in his hands, mirroring the fragility of the moment, yet he pressed on. These were the stories history had overlooked, the ones that textbooks sanitized or erased entirely. The turning tide was not only visible in civilian life but also among soldiers. Emil filmed patrols strategizing, exchanging quick, urgent gestures, sharing whispered jokes to maintain morale. One young lieutenant, barely 20, demonstrated decisive courage under scrutiny, rallying his men after an ambush that could have decimated the unit. Emil caught every flicker of emotion, the tension in the shoulders, the clench of fists, the subtle nods of trust, the unspoken fear lingering beneath discipline. Color brought immediacy to these moments, the pale gray of sweat-streaked faces, the earthy brown of mud-caked boots, the sharp red of blood on uniforms. The photographer's movements became increasingly daring. He slipped into enemy ruins, documenting deserted command posts, equipment left behind in haste, and the poignant traces of lives abruptly interrupted, letters, photographs, toys, and personal effects scattered across shattered floors. Each artifact spoke louder than any report, and Emil's camera ensured these silent witnesses survived. In one room, he discovered a diary belonging to a young soldier. Flipping through pages, he glimpsed sketches, notes, and despairing thoughts, a world halted in mid-sentence, preserved only through his lens. Beyond the villages and forests, the battlefields themselves became theaters of life and death. Emil maneuvered along the flanks, documenting tanks crawling over mud, artillery firing, and soldiers pausing to reload or rest. He filmed not the sanitized heroism of official propaganda but the tense, flawed, and fragile human reality. Each frame pulsated with immediacy, the twitch of a finger on a trigger, the blink of an eye before the blast of an explosion, the staggering exhaustion of men carrying the weight of both physical and emotional burdens. One afternoon, he stumbled upon a group of civilians attempting to bury their dead amidst the wreckage of a bombed-out village. Women lifted bodies with trembling arms, soldiers assisted silently, and children watched, bewildered, the innocence of their youth destroyed by circumstances they could never comprehend. Emil captured every gesture, every tear, every flicker of unspoken understanding. In color, the human dimension was undeniable, the muted browns of soil, the harsh reds of blood, the pale and vivid tones of grief, hope, and resilience interwoven in a tapestry of raw experience. The turning tide also brought glimpses of triumph. Emil filmed small acts of resistance, villagers sabotaging abandoned German equipment, soldiers sharing rations with civilians, secret messages exchanged across fences, all amidst the chaos. These fragments of courage, though invisible in official histories, were vital threads in the narrative of the war. His camera, steady and unflinching, ensured they would not vanish. By late evening, Emil found himself atop a hill overlooking a partially liberated town. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows and painting the landscape in shades of burnt orange and deep violet. Fires smoldered in some areas, smoke curling into the sky, while elsewhere children played amidst rubble, laughter piercing the acrid air. Emil's lens captured the paradox, devastation and hope, despair and perseverance, chaos and order. The images were not only documentation, they were testimony, evidence that the human spirit could endure and adapt even in its darkest hours. The day concluded with a final, haunting scene. A soldier, alone on a hillside, gazed at the distant horizon, clutching a photograph of his family. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with mud and tears, yet his posture remained steadfast. Emil's camera framed him against the setting sun, colors so vivid that decades later, viewers would feel the emotional intensity as if they stood there themselves. This was history alive, unfiltered, and unrelenting. As Emil packed his equipment and descended the hill, he knew the turning tide of the war was both literal and metaphorical. The Allies were advancing, yet the human stories, the unseen acts of courage, and the subtle threads of hope and despair were what truly defined this epic. Each frame of color film he carried was a lifeline to memory, a bridge connecting the past to those who would one day witness it. And somewhere deep within him, Emil realized that the journey ahead would demand even greater courage, not just of the soldiers or civilians he documented, but of himself. The war was far from over, and the stories he had yet to capture would test his resolve, his skill, and his very survival. By mid-1944, Emil Richter's journey had taken him far beyond the passive observation of war. He was no longer merely a photographer, he had become a chronicler of clandestine acts, a silent witness to courage and desperation alike. The Allied forces were preparing a secret operation, one that could alter the trajectory of the war in ways no textbook had ever hinted. Emil was recruited, reluctantly but willingly, to accompany the unit tasked with sabotaging a strategically vital bridge, deep behind enemy lines. The plan was dangerous beyond imagination. Every detail had to be executed flawlessly. One misstep could end in capture, torture, or death. Emil's camera, now heavy with hours of recorded history, had to remain concealed while still documenting the operation. He tucked it beneath his coat, its lens peeking just enough to capture fleeting moments without drawing attention. His role was simple in theory but impossible in practice: witness, survive, and record truth. At dawn, the team assembled in a shadowed clearing. Soldiers crouched, faces grim yet determined. Engineers examined blueprints by the dim glow of lanterns, their fingers tracing lines that represented both opportunity and peril. Spies moved silently among the group, communicating in whispers, their eyes scanning for informants or patrols. Emil's breath came shallow, each inhale a reminder that the stakes were life itself. He raised his camera, capturing the group's tense energy, the beads of sweat glinting on brows, the jittering fingers adjusting rifles, the unsteady courage in young eyes. The journey to the bridge was treacherous. Muddy roads and hidden patrols required stealth. Emil recorded the team navigating the dense forest, each step calculated, each whisper measured. A wrong noise could betray them. He filmed a young corporal helping a terrified recruit across a shallow stream, steadying him with a hand on the shoulder. The color footage revealed the visceral reality: water dripping from uniforms, pale hands trembling, expressions of fear and determination intermingled. Emil knew these moments would resonate decades later, bringing history to life in ways black and white photographs could not. The night before the operation, the unit rested in a ruined farmhouse. Soldiers sat silently, eating cold rations, cleaning their weapons, and writing letters home. Emil captured the intimacy of these mundane yet emotionally charged moments. A private held a photograph of his wife, smiling faintly despite tears streaming down his dirt-streaked cheeks. Another soldier hummed a lullaby quietly, an unconscious attempt to tether himself to humanity. Emil's lens recorded all: the pale yellow of candlelight, the muted browns of worn uniforms, the dark red stains of dried mud, each hue adding weight to the story of survival. As they approached the bridge under the cover of darkness, tension coiled tightly in every muscle. Emil moved with the team, documenting their movements with a stealth he had perfected over months of hiding behind ruins and trees. Soldiers planted explosives with painstaking care, engineers checked detonation lines, and spies watched the periphery for movement. Emil's camera captured hands shaking, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight in concentration. Every moment was critical. Every frame told a story of courage, fear, and commitment. By the way, if you're clinging to this moment with me, make sure to hit subscribe, more waits just ahead. The bridge loomed ahead, its steel beams bathed in moonlight, stretching over a river that seemed impossibly wide in the darkness. Emil filmed silently, capturing the enormity of the challenge. Soldiers crawled along the beams, planting charges, communicating through hand signals. The faintest sound, metal scraping against metal, a twig snapping, threatened to betray them. Emil's lens captured the meticulous precision, the tiny gestures of trust and coordination that would determine success or disaster. Suddenly, a distant shout echoed through the forest. Hearts froze. The patrols had detected something, or perhaps it was only the wind, but the threat was real enough to send adrenaline coursing through every vein. Soldiers froze, weapons raised, eyes scanning shadows. Emil's hand tightened around the camera, fingers poised to record the raw humanity of the moment, terror, courage, and instinct merging into a singular intensity. Hours passed in a blur of silent labor and tense waiting. Explosives were placed, triggers tested, and escape routes memorized. Emil moved among them, filming small gestures, a comforting pat on a soldier's back, whispered encouragement, a brief glance at the sky as if seeking divine protection. Color rendered each detail vividly, the pale green of sweat-soaked uniforms, the warm gold of lantern light reflecting off metal, the dark red of soil disturbed by hurried movements. At the moment of detonation, Emil captured everything in slow, deliberate frames. The charges ignited, a fiery bloom erupting across the bridge. Steel twisted, sparks flew, and the river below roared as debris plunged into its waters. Soldiers shouted in elation and relief, the operation had succeeded. Emil's footage revealed the enormity of human effort and bravery, expressions of triumph interwoven with fatigue and relief, bodies poised between collapse and exhilaration. Even in success, the cost was evident. A young engineer had been caught in a minor blast, his leg injured. Soldiers rushed to aid him, lifting him carefully, their faces etched with concern. Emil filmed discreetly, capturing both the intensity of the mission and its human price. Every color, every shadow, every expression amplified the immediacy of the moment. As dawn approached, the team dispersed into the forest, shadows dissolving into the early light. Emil reviewed his camera's contents, his chest heavy with the realization that this footage would one day reveal the extraordinary courage of ordinary people, and the precise, delicate human machinery behind wartime strategy. The bridge had fallen, the operation had succeeded, and yet Emil understood that the story was far from over. There were more lives to witness, more moments of heroism, more tragedy and hope to immortalize. The morning sun cast long, warming beams over the forest canopy. Birds cautiously emerged, their songs faint yet insistent, echoing the resilience Emil had captured through his lens. Soldiers settled into temporary positions, tending to injuries and planning their next moves. Emil felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that he was carrying decades of untold history in his camera, waiting for the world to finally see it in color. In that moment, amid the still smoldering adrenaline of victory, Emil made a quiet vow: he would continue to follow the story, to capture life and death, courage and fear, tragedy and fleeting joy. Through his lens, history would live in vivid, uncompromising color. The dawn broke gray and heavy, suffused with the scent of smoke, mud, and the faint tang of blood. Emil Richter trudged through the forest, camera in hand, his legs stiff from the hours of tension the previous night had demanded. The bridge had fallen, the mission had succeeded, but the triumph was bittersweet. The casualties were real, immediate, and unforgettable. Soldiers carried their injured comrades on improvised stretchers, some faces pale with shock, others etched with exhaustion, and yet all moving with a quiet determination that weighed on Emil's chest as much as the camera he bore. He documented each moment with careful precision. The camera, a tool of memory and witness, captured more than strategy or propaganda, it captured life at its most vulnerable. One young engineer, barely 17, sat against a tree, clutching his leg and wincing at every movement. Emil lowered his lens, framing the small boy against the gnarled roots. the pale green of moss and the muted brown of mud forming a stark contrast to the crimson stains spreading across the uniform. The color made it undeniable, war was as intimate and personal as it was vast and impersonal. Across the forest, civilians emerged cautiously from their hiding places, tentative steps into spaces that had been a battlefield just hours before. A woman held a baby tightly to her chest, scanning the trees for lingering soldiers or danger. Behind her, a man guided a small cart of salvaged belongings, his eyes hollow but alert. Emil moved among them discreetly, capturing gestures of resilience and fear alike, a child clutching a tattered toy, a dog sniffing cautiously through rubble, a neighbor offering bread to a stranger. The war's cruelty was undeniable, but so too was the persistence of life. He reached a small clearing where soldiers were tending to the wounded. The engineer from the night before had been laid down on a blanket, a medic adjusting a makeshift splint on his leg. Sweat and grime coated every face, blending with dried blood and tears. Emil filmed carefully, aware that each frame would carry the emotional weight of countless untold stories. The lieutenant who had led the operation moved among the men quietly, offering encouragement and reassurance, his stoic demeanor barely masking the toll on his own body and mind. In another corner, a group of prisoners of war, freed in the chaos of the bridge's destruction, huddled together, their relief mingled with disbelief. Emil adjusted the focus, capturing their fragile smiles, the trembling hands, the haunted eyes that had seen more than any person should endure. In vivid color, the details were unbearable and beautiful all at once, the faded stripes of their uniforms, the raw pallor of their skin, the soft light of early morning illuminating their expressions of cautious hope. Yet, as Emil moved further, he confronted the stark realities that triumph could not erase. Rubble littered the ground, charred timbers and shattered beams forming grotesque landscapes. Buildings that had been homes, schools, or marketplaces were now nothing more than fragments. Emil filmed children cautiously stepping over debris, their curiosity mingled with fear, their small hands brushing against ruined walls. Each image was a testament to innocence surviving in extremity, a fleeting grace amid destruction. The soldiers, despite their victory, were haunted. Some sat silently, staring at nothing, replaying moments of terror in their minds. Others consoled comrades, hands on shoulders, whispered words that carried the weight of shared suffering. Emil's camera moved among them, capturing fleeting gestures that spoke more about humanity than any report could. A simple clasp of hands, a shoulder leaned against another, eyes closed in prayer, these small moments of connection were the fragile threads holding life together in a shattered world. As Emil walked through the aftermath, he encountered a young girl sifting through the debris of what had been her home. She found a small porcelain doll, half broken but still intact. She clutched it to her chest, tears streaking her dust-covered face. Emil knelt, capturing the poignancy of the moment, the contrast of innocence and devastation, the bright pink of the doll's dress against the muted gray rubble, the vulnerability of the human spirit refusing to vanish. He filmed soldiers assisting villagers to recover what little they could salvage, their hands and movements tender, careful, almost reverent. Each act of kindness amid destruction became more meaningful in color, more palpable and immediate. A man handed a loaf of bread to a child, his eyes meeting Emil's briefly as if acknowledging the presence of a witness. Another soldier cradled a baby, careful not to jostle the fragile body while scanning the surrounding trees for any hidden threat. Every detail, every gesture, every nuance mattered. By mid-afternoon, Emil came upon the aftermath of an accidental explosion. An errant charge from the night's operation had caught part of the nearby woods, igniting dry leaves and branches. Firefighters, mostly soldiers trained hastily for this purpose, rushed to contain the flames. Emil filmed from a safe distance, capturing the dynamic interplay of orange and red flames against the deep greens of the forest, the expressions of urgency and determination on the faces of those risking themselves to save lives. Color here was a narrative itself, dramatizing danger and heroism simultaneously. Emil's attention returned to the human stories. Soldiers consoled one another, civilians helped carry stretchers, and medics worked tirelessly to prevent infection and further injury. One soldier, sitting alone on a fallen log, stared at a photograph of a loved one. Emil approached quietly, filming the flicker of longing, grief, and resolve in the young man's eyes. The vividness of color made the emotional resonance almost unbearable, as if the viewer could feel the cold air, the faint warmth of sunlight, and the sharp tang of blood and smoke simultaneously. By evening, Emile retreated to a quiet ridge overlooking the village, exhausted but alive. The scale of human endurance, courage, and vulnerability he had witnessed left him both awed and haunted. He reviewed the day's footage, the images unfolding in vivid detail on his small viewing screen. Here were soldiers and civilians, joy and despair, fear and defiance, all captured in a visual truth that no textbook, no black and white photograph, no second-hand account could ever convey. The cost of war was staggering. Lives lost, homes destroyed, innocence shattered, but still, against overwhelming odds, humanity persisted. Emile understood that his mission was no longer optional. He must continue documenting, for the world would one day need these unvarnished truths. His lens was both shield and witness, capturing not only what happened, but what it meant, what it felt like, and what it cost. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, warming shadows across the ruined landscape, Emile adjusted his camera one last time for the day. The colors of dusk painted a surreal yet brutally honest scene, golden light glinting off steel helmets, the deep red of fresh soil, muted greens and browns of trampled vegetation, and the pale, luminous faces of the human beings who had endured so much. History had been preserved, in all its raw, unflinching reality. Emile knew the next phase would be even more dangerous. The bridge had fallen, but the war raged on. Lives, stories, and landscapes continued to hang precariously between survival and destruction. And through it all, Emile's camera remained a bridge between the past and the future, a testament to what had truly transpired, immortalized in color, texture, and emotion. The war, though relentless, began to shift in ways Emile Richter could hardly have imagined months ago. The Allies were pushing forward steadily, German positions crumbling under the weight of strategy, exhaustion, and relentless human will. Emile, still carrying his camera, now had an additional burden, the knowledge that his work was a historical record, one that might never see the light of day if he did not survive to tell the story. Yet he pressed on, drawn by the duty to bear witness, and by the memory of faces he could never forget. Returning to the outskirts of a partially liberated city, Emile observed the eerie juxtaposition of normalcy and devastation. The streets were lined with ruined buildings, shattered windows, and overturned vehicles. Yet life insisted on creeping back into the cracks, shopkeepers cautiously opening doors, women hanging clothes to dry, children playing among rubble as if defying destruction itself. Emile's camera captured it all, the vivid reds of torn banners, the earthy browns of crumbled stone, the delicate greens of plants reclaiming the soil, every detail a testament to resilience. He paused before a collapsed apartment building. Smoke still lingered from fires that had burned days ago, curling in gray ribbons toward a sky streaked with muted sunset. Inside, he glimpsed a family huddled together among fallen beams, their faces streaked with soot, eyes wide but alive. The father cradled his youngest child while his wife held the older sibling, murmuring words Emile could not hear. The raw intimacy of the scene drew a tremor from Emile's hands, yet he pressed the camera to his eye and recorded it faithfully. Here, amidst ruin, life endured. Color amplified the scene's intensity, the delicate pink of a child's cheek, the faint blue of torn clothing, the dark red of embers smoldering nearby. Beyond the city, Emile traveled to the countryside he had first arrived at months before. The villages had changed, some had been rebuilt, others abandoned, and many bore the scars of relentless bombardment. Farmers tilled shattered fields, villagers rebuilt homes with patchwork roofs and salvaged bricks, and children ran freely where fear had once dictated every step. Emile captured the cycles of human effort, documenting small victories that collectively spoke of survival. He filmed the woman planting seeds in the mud, her hands caked with soil yet gentle, her face streaked with sweat and determination. This, he realized, was as much a story of the war as battles and strategies, the quiet reclamation of life. At one farmhouse, Emile encountered a small group of returning soldiers. Their expressions carried a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and subtle guilt for those left behind. They spoke little, tending to their own wounds and assisting villagers in reconstructing homes. Emil's lens caught each gesture, the weary tilt of a head, a hand brushing soot from a child's hair, the careful lifting of a damaged cart filled with supplies. Each frame was saturated with color and emotional resonance, creating a living record of the human cost and commitment that accompanied survival. As night fell, Emil settled near a riverbank to review his footage. The images on the small viewer shimmered in vivid detail, each one a testament to human resilience and tragedy alike. Soldiers aiding civilians, children reclaiming play amid ruin, families clinging to remnants of their homes, all frozen in a palette of raw, living color. The emotional weight was nearly unbearable. He realized that the world would someday see these moments, not sanitized, not filtered through propaganda, but true to life, each frame a vessel of memory. Emil's thoughts wandered to his own home, now distant and fragile in memory. He pictured the streets he had left behind, the faces of neighbors, the comforting familiarity of routine that war had rendered impossible. The contrast between memory and reality deepened his understanding of the human experience. Survival was not merely avoidance of death, but the reclamation of identity, community, and humanity. His camera, filled with color and stories, was his bridge back to that world. In the days that followed, Emil traversed towns recently liberated. He documented soldiers and civilians sharing moments of laughter, meals, and cautious hope. One evening, he filmed a simple dinner, bread, cheese, and potatoes shared among men and women who had survived bombings and occupation. The muted golden glow of the firelight illuminated their faces, revealing exhaustion softened by relief, fear tempered by connection. Every subtle gesture, the passing of a plate, a hand on a shoulder, a smile, became immortal in Emil's frames. Color gave these small acts weight and texture, revealing the humanity beneath the veneer of survival. Yet war's shadows lingered. Emil encountered families mourning the dead, homes reduced to rubble, and landscapes irreversibly altered. Each frame captured grief, anger, and the quiet endurance of those who persisted. A young widow, cradling her child among ruins, looked into Emil's camera as if seeing the world through the lens of someone who could preserve her story. He felt the gravity of responsibility press upon him. His work was no longer documentation alone, but a moral obligation. History would not remember the silent suffering without his lens. By the time Emil reached a hill overlooking a once thriving city, the sun dipped low, casting long, melancholic shadows. Smoke lingered in the air, faint traces of conflict yet undeniable evidence of survival. Soldiers and civilians mingled cautiously in the streets below, their interactions a delicate balance of trust, fear, and gratitude. Emil filmed quietly, aware that these moments, so fragile, so human, were what truly defined the war, beyond victories, losses, and strategic maneuvers. That night, Emil reviewed his camera one final time for the day. The images were staggering in their immediacy, soldiers and civilians, triumph and despair, courage and grief, all captured in the vibrant reality of color. He understood that his role had transformed entirely. He was no longer an observer but a guardian of memory, a witness whose work would speak across generations. These stories, once invisible, now lived vividly in film. As Emil lay beneath a sky streaked with stars, he felt the full weight of the war's cost. Lives had been lost, homes destroyed, innocence shattered, yet resilience endured. He understood that his journey was nearing an end, the final chapters of the conflict, the liberation, the homecoming. Yet the human stories he had witnessed, the color, the emotion, the truth, would remain eternal through his lens. The first signs of dawn crept over the shattered horizon as Colonel Marcus Hale stood alone on the cliff overlooking the ruins of the Black Meridian facility. The sea below churned violently, as if protesting the truths that had finally surfaced after decades of silence. Behind him, the wind carried the distant echo of explosions, remnants of the battle that had nearly cost them everything. But this morning was different. For the first time since the war began, Hale felt the weight of history shifting. The 6 secrets they had uncovered, the Phantom Division, the Lazarus Protocol, the Mind Vault, Valkyrie 9, Operation Iron Chorus, and the Code of 9, were enough to rewrite everything the world believed about World War II. But one file remained. One room remained. One secret that no historian, no government, no surviving soldier had ever acknowledged. The seventh secret. And Hale knew exactly where it was kept. The final key. Elena Voss approached quietly, limping on her injured leg, but her posture remained as sharp as ever. She held a rusted metal case, sealed with 4 mechanical locks and a central brass dial engraved with an insignia Hale recognized instantly, 2 intersecting circles drawn around a lone star. "The archivist's mark," Hale whispered. Elena nodded. "The only symbol he ever used. This is what he died protecting." They opened the case together. Inside was a glass cylinder containing a single, thin strip of microfilm. A note rested beside it, written in a neat, calculated hand: "If the world ever learns the 7, it must learn them all. Do not reveal this unless humanity is prepared to carry the burden." The archivist Elena inhaled sharply. He knew this day would come. Hale picked up the microfilm, holding it against the rising sun. Lines of coded text glimmered faintly. "This isn't just a file," he murmured. "It's a map." "A map to what?" Elena asked. Hale turned to her, expression grave. "To the beginning." The hidden war. The microfilm decoded into coordinates that pointed far away from Europe, far from the well-documented battlefronts. They led to a barren plateau in Central Asia, untouched by war and unknown to military archives. When the two arrived by transport aircraft, the land was eerily silent. No ruins. No bunkers. No signs of conflict. Just an endless stretch of desert, cracked and scorched by time. "This can't be right," Elena muttered. "The war never reached here." Hale knelt, brushing sand aside. Beneath the surface, metal glinted, smooth, unnatural, cold. He cleared more sand until an enormous steel hatch was revealed, 20 meters wide, circular, and marked with the archivist's insignia. "This wasn't a battlefield," Hale said slowly. "This was a vault." And inside it, according to the microfilm, was the 7th secret, the one the Axis and Allies both erased from history. Elena placed her hand on the hatch. "Then let's finish what we started." The hatch opened with a deep mechanical groan, releasing a gust of cold air that smelled of old metal and something else, something ancient. They descended. The world's first shadow. The corridor stretched endlessly, lined with rusted pipes and dim emergency lights still flickering with erratic electricity. At the far end stood a reinforced steel door. Hale pushed it open. Inside lay the remains of a massive underground facility, a laboratory, a command center, and archives combined. Papers littered the floor, diagrams, maps, radio transcripts, all bearing the same codename, Project ORPHEUS. Elena read the header aloud. Initiated 1937. Terminated 1945. Objective: manipulate world events from behind the illusion of war. Her voice trembled. This wasn't a weapon. It was a machine for control. Hale sifted through the documents. Each file detailed operations carried out not by nations, but by a hidden council of scientists, strategists, and defected intelligence officers from multiple countries. Not Axis. Not allies. Something else. Something above. The war wasn't just between governments, Hale whispered. It was steered by a group that never appeared in any archive. A group that controlled misinformation, planted false orders, and orchestrated events to push nations into conflict. Elena stared at him. A shadow world government? No, Hale said. Worse. A collective that believed war was necessary to accelerate human evolution. Project Orpheus had manipulated events on both sides, not to win the war, but to sustain it. To keep the conflict going, Elena murmured. To study fear. Resistance. Innovation. Human limits. And to shape the world that would come after. This was the truth no historian ever found. The war wasn't only fought on land, sea, and air. It was engineered. Curated. Directed like a global experiment. The last message. At the center of the facility sat a single metal pedestal. On it rested a reel-to-reel audio recorder connected to a power generator still flickering weakly. Hale pulled the switch. White noise filled the room. Then a calm male voice spoke, the same voice they'd heard in earlier files. The archivist. If you are hearing this, then humanity stands at the threshold of truth. Know this, the war ended not because nations sought peace, but because Orpheus collapsed under its own weight. Betrayal, fear, and the uncontrollable nature of conflict destroyed the council from within. His tone hardened. What you choose to do with this knowledge will define the next century. If the 7 secrets are revealed prematurely, the world will fracture. But if hidden forever, the cycle may return. A long pause. War begins when truth ends. Guard the truth, or history will repeat itself. The tape ended. Hale stood frozen. Elena whispered, so this is the 7th secret. The war behind the war. The truth that governments hid. The truth historians never suspected. The truth the archivist died protecting. The burden as they left the facility, Hale looked back one final time. The desert winds quickly began covering the hatch again, burying the past. So what now? Elena asked quietly. Hale held the microfilm, feeling its weight. Now, we decide which world we want to live in. One built on lies for the sake of peace, or truth for the sake of freedom. Elena looked toward the horizon. The world deserves the truth. But is the world ready for it? Hale countered. Neither spoke for a long moment. The sun rose fully, casting golden light over the desert, the same light that once illuminated a war shaped by forces no soldier, no leader, no nation ever fully understood. Finally, Hale nodded. Then we tell it. All 7 secrets. The full story. No more shadows. Elena smiled faintly. The truth becomes history today. Together, they walked toward the transport aircraft, the weight of the world behind them, and the future of truth ahead.